Every year, about 2 million people stand at a viewpoint on the Big Sur coast and photograph the same scene. McWay Falls drops 80 feet onto a white sand cove with turquoise water. Travel magazines call it the most beautiful beach in California. But that beach did not exist before 1983. 26 bulldozers built it over 22 weeks by pushing 4 million cubic yards of mountain directly into the Pacific Ocean. And somewhere inside that sand is the operator who was clearing the slide when the mountain came down a second time. His name was Ernest Pierce. His body was never recovered. His machine was never found. And 10 years later, Congress made the method that created that beach a federal crime. This is that story. The winter of 1982 to 1983 was the wettest Big Sur had ever recorded. The rain gauge at Mining Ridge measured more than 178 inches before the gauge itself failed. That is nearly 15 feet of water falling on a mountain range that was already unstable, because the rock underneath Highway 1 is not really rock at all. Geologists call it the Franciscan Complex. It is a scrap pile of ancient ocean floor, sheared shale, volcanic basalt, and a green mineral called serpentinite that turns into clay when it gets wet. Imagine a fruitcake where the batter is crushed glass. That is what holds up the most scenic highway in America. And in March 1983, at a location called Sycamore Draw, just north of Julia Pfeiffer Burns State Park, the mountain let go. The slide scar reached 963 feet up the slope. The volume of rock and earth that came down measured roughly 4 million cubic yards. To put that in perspective, you could fill more than 400,000 dump trucks with the material that buried Highway 1 that spring. It was the largest single earth-moving event in the history of Caltrans, the agency responsible for every state highway in California. The road disappeared, not damaged, not cracked, gone, buried under hundreds of feet of debris on a cliff face above the Pacific Ocean. Caltrans had one option they had used before and would use again: line up the bulldozers at the top and push everything off the edge. They brought in 26 bulldozers. Operators came from across the Central Coast, men who made their living on machines that weigh as much as a loaded semi-truck. One of those operators was a man everyone called Skinner Pierce from Morro Bay, about 100 miles south of the slide. Pierce was almost certainly a contractor's employee, not a direct Caltrans worker. His name does not appear on the Caltrans memorial wall that lists every agency employee killed on the job since 1921. That distinction matters because it helps explain why almost nobody remembers him. If you want to see what happened next, and why the beach you have seen in photographs is actually a grave site, like and subscribe. We cover stories like this 3 to 4 times a week, and this channel only works if people show up for them. Pierce was working the slide face in April 1983, clearing debris alongside the other operators when the mountain moved again. A secondary slide came down on top of him. Contemporary accounts describe the event differently depending on the source. One Caltrans-affiliated document says he was buried. Another says he fell with the slide into the ocean. What every source agrees on is the outcome. The search crews never found his body. They never found his machine. And they did not stop the operation. They could not stop. Highway 1 was the only road connecting the Big Sur coast to the rest of California, and the communities south of the slide were cut off. So the 26 remaining bulldozers kept pushing for 22 weeks. Day after day, the operators shoved rock and dirt and the remains of the old highway straight off the cliff and into the Pacific. Millions of cubic yards of California mountain piled up in the surf below McWay Falls. Before 1983, McWay Falls was what geologists call a tide fall. The water dropped directly into the ocean. There was no beach. But after 22 weeks of bulldozers pushing that mountain into the water, a new shoreline appeared. Sand and sediment settled into the cove, forming the crescent of white sand that visitors see today from the overlook. The most photographed shoreline in California is, in part, a manufactured tailings pile from a fatal cleanup operation. Pierce was not the first operator to die on this coast. 10 years earlier, on February 11, 1973, a Caltrans maintenance worker named Bob Huss was clearing a slide at Lafleur Canyon, less than 2 miles south of where Pierce would later be buried. His skip loader went off the edge and into the ocean. Boulders from the slide crushed him. The San Francisco Chronicle reported the story the next day under the headline, "Boulders Bury Victim at Big Sur." The repair cost was $479,000 in 1973. Money. Huss is also not on the Caltrans memorial. 2 men, 2 machines, both swallowed by the same stretch of coast within a decade. We are telling these stories because they disappear if nobody does. Like and subscribe if you think the men who built and maintained these roads deserve to be remembered. But what makes the Pierce story different from every other construction fatality on Highway 1 is what his death sits on top of. The method that killed him, 26 bulldozers pushing everything into the ocean, was not some reckless decision made in a crisis. It was standard procedure. Caltrans project manager Joe Irwin said it plainly years later. Go and start at the top of that mountain with a team of bulldozers, and just start pushing material into the ocean until we got back to where the original highway was. That is how we used to do it in the 1980s. And the coast remembers. The road has been closed by slides, mud flows, and erosion more than 55 times since it opened on June 27, 1937. The original highway itself was carved out of this same unstable rock by San Quentin prison convicts starting in the 1920s. About 120 prisoners worked each camp at a time, paid $2.10 a day on paper. But after the state deducted clothing, food, medical care, tools, and even the guards' salaries, each man took home about 34 cents. If a prisoner escaped, a $200 bounty was placed on his head, and the bounty came out of his pay if he was recaptured. The geography was the real prison. Cliffs on one side, ocean on the other, and 60 miles of nothing in between. During that original construction, at least one steam shovel fell more than 500 feet into the Pacific and was destroyed. That was in the 1920s. Skinner Pierce's machine fell from nearly the same height, on nearly the same coast, 60 years later. The tools got bigger. The danger did not change. On January 1, 1993, Congress designated the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, covering 6,094 square miles of ocean from the Marin Headlands to Cambria. The entire Big Sur coast fell inside the boundary. Under federal regulation, discharging or depositing any material into the sanctuary became prohibited. The method that built McWay Cove's beach, the method that buried Skinner Pierce, became a federal crime overnight. So when the next catastrophic slide came, Caltrans could not push. On May 20, 2017, roughly 6 million cubic yards of mountainside collapsed at Mud Creek near Gorda, burying a quarter mile of Highway 1 under 65 feet of debris and pushing 15 acres of new shoreline into the Pacific. NASA later confirmed the slide had been creeping at 7 inches per year since at least 2009 before the final collapse. It was even bigger than the 1983 slide that killed Pierce. But this time, Caltrans built the road on top of the debris instead of clearing it. John Madonna Construction out of San Luis Obispo won the $54 million contract. Madonna is the son of the man who built the famous Madonna Inn, and his company still runs a Cat D9 his father bought decades ago. The Mud Creek rebuild finished 2 months ahead of schedule in July 2018. And then came the next evolution. In February 2025, Caltrans helicoptered 2 remote-controlled Caterpillar D8 bulldozers and 1 remote-controlled excavator to the Regent's slide site, further up the coast. Each D8 weighs about 87,000 pounds and runs a 363 horsepower engine. But for the first time in 88 years of Highway 1 history, nobody sat in the cab. The land at Regent's Slide was moving more than a foot per day in August 2024, with cracking detected within a 500-foot circle around the work zone. Caltrans spokesperson Kevin Drabinski put it simply, "We can never put operators across those cracks." From 26 bulldozers pushing a mountain into the ocean with a man buried inside it, to unmanned machines flown in by helicopter. That is not just an engineering upgrade, and that is an industry retreating from a method that ate its own workers and the coastline together. Highway 1 at Regent's Slide reopened on January 14, 2026, restoring through traffic between Carmel and Cambria for the first time in nearly 3 years. The repair cost was $82.6 million for half a mile of road. The national average for highway maintenance runs about $18,000 per lane, mile per year. Big Sur runs at roughly $160 million per mile when the mountain decides to move. But you cannot fix the geology. The cliffs are retreating at about 7 inches per year. More than 1,500 individual landslides have been mapped along 75 miles of coast. Caltrans has spent more than $325 million on Big Sur emergency repairs since 2016 alone. Skinner Pierce is still at the bottom of Sycamore Draw. His machine remains there with him. 2 million people a year stand at the McWay Falls overlook and photograph the beach his colleagues accidentally created when they pushed the mountain that buried him into the ocean. The postcard does not mention his name. Like and subscribe. Tell us in the comments, should they put a plaque at McWay Falls for Skinner Pierce? We have more stories like this one coming this week, and every single one of them starts with a machine that never came back.